They all said I was worthless. But when the lawyer read my grandfather's will, he looked me in the eye and said, "You are the sole heir." The room went silent, and every pair of eyes burned into me. I can still remember the way the air shifted that morning. The lawyer's office was cramped, lined with shelves of thick, dust-covered files, but the silence made it feel even smaller. My parents sat stiffly on one side of the long oak table, their hands folded in practiced calm, though I caught the tension in their jaws. My sister leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, smirking like she already knew the outcome. I wasn't supposed to be here. At least, that's what they told me over the years, that I was too weak, too naive, too unimportant to carry any family responsibility. "You'll never amount to anything," my father used to say, and the words stuck, echoing long after I'd left home. But when the lawyer opened the envelope and began reading, something shifted. Every sentence seemed to drag, my pulse thudding in my ears, until he finally paused, cleared his throat, and read aloud, "To my only grandchild who never turned their back on me." I leave everything. I froze. Everyone froze. The smirk on my sister's face collapsed. My mother's hand gripped the table so tightly her knuckles whitened. My father muttered something under his breath, low and angry, but I heard it. Impossible. I wanted to believe it was a mistake. Some cruel trick. But the lawyer's eyes were steady, and the paper in his hands carried my grandfather's signature. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about money. It was about a secret my family had tried to bury, a truth that explained why they had spent years convincing me I was nothing. The lawyer cleared his throat again, his voice echoing in the tight room. "All assets, including property, business shares, and accounts, are to be transferred to the named heir effective immediately." His gaze flicked to me once more, as though making sure I understood the weight of it. My sister leaned forward, her voice sharp. "There must be some kind of error. Dad, say something." She turned to my father, expecting him to fight, but his face had gone red. He wasn't shocked. It was rage. "You manipulated him," he hissed at me. "You poisoned his mind." "I didn't," I whispered, though my voice came out unsteady. "I barely saw him." "You all made sure of that." The lawyer raised his hand, trying to maintain order, but the room was already unraveling. My mother's eyes darted to the floor, avoiding mine completely. My father slammed his palm against the table, making the files shake. I sat there trying to make sense of it all. Why me? Why now? And why had my grandfather chosen to put me in the center of a storm I wasn't sure I could survive? As I left the office that day, clutching a folder filled with documents I never expected to hold, one thing became clear. My family wasn't going to let this go. And their fight had only just begun. When I walked out of the lawyer's office that morning, the air outside felt heavier than inside. I held the folder against my chest like it might protect me, but the street was too bright, too exposed. I could almost feel my father's eyes burning into my back, even though I hadn't looked over my shoulder. I didn't make it to my car before my sister caught up. Her heels clicked against the pavement, sharp and furious. "Don't get comfortable," she spat. "Dad's not going to let this stand. You don't deserve it." I opened my mouth, but nothing came. She was gone before I could speak, storming toward their car where my parents were already waiting. My father didn't even look at me as he slammed his door shut, but the roar of the engine was enough to tell me this wasn't over. For years, they had called me the outsider. The one who never tried hard enough, never lived up to the family name. When I was younger, I thought maybe they were right. Maybe I was too quiet, too careful. But the will changed everything, and I couldn't figure out why my grandfather had trusted me, of all people, to carry his legacy. I went home and sat at my small kitchen table, the folder still unopened in front of me. My apartment was modest, 2 rooms, 2nd floor, creaky pipes that groaned whenever I ran the water. It didn't match the picture of someone about to inherit millions. That contrast alone made me uneasy. I finally opened the folder. Deeds, account numbers, letters from the lawyer, and then, tucked at the bottom, a handwritten note on yellowing paper. You were the only one who listened. Don't let them take this from you. I stared at the words until they blurred. When had I listened? The only memory that came back was of sitting with him on his porch when I was 16. He had asked me what I wanted from life. I told him the truth, that I didn't know, but I wanted to be seen for who I was, not for who they wanted me to be. He had smiled at me that day in a way no one else in my family ever had. A knock at the door jolted me out of it. I opened it to find my mother standing there, her face pale, her lips tight. She didn't wait to be invited in. "You don't understand what you're stepping into," she said, her voice low, urgent. "Your grandfather had no right. Your father built everything he left you." "That's not what the will says," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Her eyes hardened. "You think this is a victory? You've just signed yourself up for a war you can't win." And then she was gone, leaving the faint scent of her perfume in the air and a weight in my chest I couldn't shake. That night, as I sat in the dark, one thought haunted me. If they had spent years convincing me I was worthless, what lengths would they go to now that I was the one standing in their way? The next few days felt like a blur. I barely left my apartment, afraid that every sound in the hallway was one of them coming back. I checked the locks 3 times each night, yet sleep never came easily. The folder sat on my desk, a constant reminder of both what I had gained and what I might lose. On the 3rd day, I received a letter slipped under my door. No stamp, no envelope, just a folded piece of paper with my name scrawled across it. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, in my father's handwriting, were the words, "Come to the house tonight. We need to settle this, alone." I should have ignored it. I should have called the lawyer or even the police. But part of me wanted answers. I wanted to understand why they hated me enough to fight over something that, according to my grandfather's own words, was never theirs. The house looked the same as when I'd last seen it. Tall iron gates, the trimmed hedges my grandfather had always been proud of. But inside, it felt different, colder, as if his absence had stripped it of its warmth. They were waiting for me in the living room. My father stood by the fireplace, his hands gripping the mantel. My mother sat rigidly on the sofa, while my sister paced back and forth, like she couldn't contain her anger. "You think this is yours?" My father started, his voice low, steady. "Everything in this house exists because of me. He might have signed the papers, but without me, he had nothing." "That's not what he believed," I said quietly. "He chose me for a reason." My father's face twisted. "You want the reason? Fine, he pitied you. He saw a weak child and thought handing you everything would give you strength. But strength can't be gifted. It's earned." My sister slammed her hand against the table. "Stop pretending you don't know. He left you the business because you were the only one he trusted not to sell it. He knew Dad would run it into the ground." The words hung in the air. My father turned sharply toward her, his eyes flashing with fury. "Enough!" But it was too late. I had heard it. My grandfather hadn't left me everything out of pity. He had done it out of protection. Protection from my own father. "Is that true?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Did he know you were failing?" Silence. My father's jaw clenched, his eyes refusing to meet mine. That silence was answer enough. I realized then that my inheritance wasn't just wealth, it was leverage. Proof that I wasn't the worthless child they had convinced me I was. Proof that my grandfather had seen something in me they had never bothered to look for. But the look in my father's eyes told me something else, too. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I left their house that night with my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. My father's silence had told me everything. He had built his reputation on lies, and my grandfather had known it all along. The next morning I sat across from the lawyer once again. My hands shook as I slid the folded letter across the desk, the one my father had slipped under my door. "They're not going to stop," I told him. "I need to know what options I have." He read it, his brow furrowing. "Threats won't work in their favor," he said firmly. "The will is airtight, but you should be careful. If they push too far, you have legal grounds to protect yourself." I nodded, but inside, I knew this wasn't just about the law. It was about reclaiming my voice after years of silence. Later that week, I returned to the house, this time not as the unwanted child, but as its rightful owner. The staff looked uneasy when I walked through the doors, but no one stopped me. I could almost hear my grandfather's voice in the back of my mind. "Don't let them take this from you." My parents were in the dining room, arguing in hushed tones. When they saw me, my father's face darkened. "You have no right to be here," he said. I steadied my voice. "Actually, I do. Legally, everything here is mine. And you knew it before I did." For a moment, no one spoke. My sister shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us. My mother pressed her lips together, but her eyes betrayed something I hadn't expected. Fear. "I know what grandfather saw," I continued. "He didn't trust you to protect what he built. And after what I've seen, he was right." My father's jaw tightened, but I didn't flinch. For the first time in my life, I wasn't shrinking under his shadow. My sister broke the silence. "So what now? You cut us off and live here alone?" Her words stung, but I stayed firm. "What I do with this inheritance is my choice, not his. Not yours, mine." I left before they could answer. It wasn't triumph I felt, it was clarity. They had spent years convincing me I was nothing. But the truth was simple. I was stronger than they ever allowed me to believe. That night, sitting at the same oak table where the will had been read, I opened my grandfather's note again. The handwriting shook slightly at the edges, but the words were steady. "You were the only one who listened." For the first time, I understood. He hadn't chosen me because he pitied me. He had chosen me because I had seen him, not as a man of wealth, but as a person. The realization washed over me like air after drowning. Betrayal had shaped me, yes, but it had also given me the chance to be reborn. I was no longer the worthless child. I was the heir, and I was ready to live like it.